Française, a week of France on Channel 4.
Now Trevor Phillips with the second of 3 London programme specials.
Good evening and welcome to the second of our London programme specials about the lives of young people in the capital. Tonight we'll be examining the impact of London's drugs epidemic on the young and revealing evidence that increasing numbers of children are becoming hooked. We'll also be asking how teachers cope as pupils use and deal drugs inside schools. And our exclusive poll of 700 youngsters commissioned by the London programme exposes just how far the drugs culture has spread. We start with the children for whom drugs are just another part of growing up.
At raves, I smoke crack and everything, but I don't know, I ain't addicted, I just enjoy doing it.
People around me, where I live, they all smoke, so you get so bored. You're so bored, you get to fill up, you want to smoke it more and more.
Wherever my next fix was coming from, it was like a magnet, I'd go straight there.
When I started, I was about 8. When I got offered it by my mate, I said, yeah, I'll try this. So I tried it, and I was just, dizzy. I couldn't stop wobbling about everywhere.
David is now 12 years old. He's been smoking cannabis for 4 years. Drugs are readily available for him and his friends.
I used to come in a field like I am now and smoke it in here with my mates. Someone will offer you drugs just to... just like over there, all the big flats. If you just walk out your front door, they're on your balcony. I mean, trying to deal you drugs.
David lives on the Stonebridge estate in North London. It's one of the capital's toughest areas and is notorious for drug dealing.
They deal it everywhere. And they deal it outside shops and everything.
Everything.
What sort of drugs are available and who would you be able to get them from?
You've only got to walk on the precinct, and you've got little kids our age and younger coming up offering, from crack to whatever else, hash, cooked, cannabis, whatever else. It's all over the place.
Even David's 7-year-old sister has been offered drugs.
Christina didn't know what it was when she was offered it. As far as she knew, it was a sheet of squares. They told her it was eating paper. It was acid tabs because there was little gnomes. She called them little leprechauns drawn on square pieces of paper. People around and they said it was acid tablets that she was offered.
This police surveillance footage shows a group of 12-year-old children buying drugs. It was shot on the Stonebridge estate in 1992 as part of police Operation Denham. Though 27 dealers were convicted, 2 years later it's claimed they're back in numbers and once again targeting children.
Older dealers will say, oh, have you tried this before? And they go, most of them go, no. He said, try this, it's nice. And then they go and try it.
David is currently being counselled by drugs workers, but is still unconcerned by the risks. On one occasion after a drugs binge, he passed out.
I was out for 36 hours.
And he was like it for 36 hours. He was just out cold. We had to keep holding his tongue and everything and taking it in turns to stay up with him to make sure he was okay. And when he did actually wake up, he told us he was sniffing gas.
The 12-year-old has also experimented with harder drugs. Offered to him by an older friend and unaware of exactly what he was taking, the drugs had a devastating effect.
He said swallow it, so I swallowed it, and then I went over to the park. So I felt sick. And then I was sick, then I just conked out. Then when I woke up, I didn't know what happened to me. So I got the bus home.
He was tripping for about 2 days afterwards. He was seeing all these space creatures and everything coming to get him when he was in bed. If he's sitting here, or he'd scream out something was coming through the wall to grab him or something.
According to mounting evidence, children are taking drugs earlier and moving more quickly onto harder substances. We've met children as young as 13 taking crack, cocaine or heroin. Lee is one of them.
When I first taken drugs, I was 12, and I just started smoking cannabis and weed. Then when I got older, I just went on to trips and higher stuff.
He first took crack when he was 13.
My friend's brother was just snorting some crack on the mirror. He goes, well, do you want some? So I took a little bit. Then I just felt some funny hallucinations coming through my mind. Then the next day I just went, yeah, can you get me some more crack? He went, yeah, sure, how much do you want? I went, just... So I gave him a tenner, he just got me a cup, he just got me some. So then after that, I just kept wanting some more and more.
Lee's friend John is 13 and uses cannabis heavily. At Christmas, he spent £100 buying the drug. He's already considering moving on to harder drugs, tempted by what he's heard about crack.
I would like to try it, see what the buzz be like. Because all my mates say, yeah, it's like a droopy feeling, you get hungry, you feel, oh yeah, so drowsy, you want to sleep, you don't want to sleep, you want to stay awake all the time. So I go, fair enough, if I touch that, that's what's going to happen to me.
Stockwell, South London. The practice of Dr. Harith Swadi, a psychiatrist who specialises in working with children who take drugs.
20 years ago, the average age of initiation into drug use was about 17, 18, 19. Nowadays, studies of the last couple of years indicate that the average age of initiation is about 12, 13, maximum 14.
Dr. Swadi's casebook is a startling testimony to the spread of the problem. These are just some of his cases. The youngest child he's seen was 4. The boy was imitating his older brother by sniffing lighter fuel.
His body obviously was not capable of handling the toxic effects.
One 13-year-old girl who became addicted to crack regularly went missing from home, and her father spent so much time searching for her that he lost his job.
While under the influence of crack cocaine, she got involved in a fight with a group of boys. The boys were involved in a fight with another gang, and she was in the middle of it. And she was actually stabbed.
But it's not just on the toughest inner-city estates where children are coming face-to-face with drugs. The problem is widespread, geographically and socially. The London programme commissioned the research organisation Harris to carry out a survey of more than 700 youngsters aged 15 to 19 in Greater London. 68% said they had been offered drugs. 43% were ready to admit that they'd taken drugs. Based on these figures, this would mean across London that 162,000 children in the same age group had taken drugs. Of those who had tried drugs, 41% had been 14 or under when they first experimented. Again, the total for London would be 66,000 children. The problem touches families from all social backgrounds. In fact, among children at public school, 49% said they had tried drugs, a figure higher than for those at state schools. Ollie Fay is 16. He comes from a comfortable middle-class home and attended public school. He not only took drugs, he dealt them.
The main thing I dealt in was speed. I found a lady that was about 32 that I could buy an ounce of speed off for £120. And with 27 grams speed, you can make about £270. So that kind of profit, you can keep on going.
Ollie's clients included children his own age and younger.
Children that I dealt to ranged from maybe 13 up to 17 and 18. You've got to get the message across you're their friend and you really want to help them and give them the drugs. And perhaps you can knock price off what other dealers are giving it to them for. Save speed, if they were getting it off other people for £10, sometimes I'd say, all right, I can give it to you for £7.50 for a gram. I think, wow, he's a really good friend.
That's good.
And we saw children maybe 10, 11 years old. I couldn't ever deal to these children for some reason inside me. It just felt wrong dealing with someone of that age. But I knew dealers that would ask them how much money they got a week, pretend to be their best friend, and then deal to them.
Ollie, now at a drug rehabilitation centre, once had few scruples about sacrificing his friends to satisfy his craving for drugs.
There was one time where I needed to get myself an E for the night, and I had ketamine that had been sold to me. I realised it was ketamine, and so I didn't want to take this for the night. So what I did was got well, basically one of my best friends at the time. Sold him the ketamine, went and bought myself a proper E. I saw him then on the dance floor collapse and have heavy stomach cramps and vomiting.
Did you feel bad about that afterwards, or did you just shrug it off?
I didn't feel bad because I knew I got my E from it. I feel bad about it now, about doing this kind of thing, but then you don't care when you're on the drugs.
Ketamine is a drug used by vets to anaesthetize animals. For many youngsters now, taking drugs is seen as perfectly normal. These teenagers from Hertfordshire use drugs regularly. To them, it's just a bit of fun. But like all the youngsters we spoke to, they suffered disturbing experiences.
It was New Year's Eve of this year, and we were around Brian's place, and I was out of my face at the time, as you would do, and there was a starter's gun, a starter's pistol in the place, and nobody had told me that it was loaded. So I fired it once, and it's a revolver, so I just clicked round once. I fired it again, and the actual hit the blank bullet, and all the shrapnel flew out into my eyes, and I was blinded momentarily. And that really shit me up.
Like, he was tripping as well, you know?
I dragged into the bathroom, washed my eyes out and that. I was all right after that. I just had bloodshot eyes, and I haven't done any acid or anything like that since.
Sam is also from Hertfordshire. She's 15 and deals drugs. Even in rural areas, the drugs business is booming. Her youngest client to date is 12.
I could get most things, like trips and E's and puffs and everything, and like, it depends on like what you wanted, how much of it you wanted, to what you'd have to pay basically. E's are £15 each, but if you buy them like, two, you get £1 off, and if you buy 3, you get another £1 off, and it goes on like that.
Sam buys from adult dealers and uses some of her profits to buy drugs for herself. Her list of clients is growing.
There's about 40, 50 of them that I probably would get it for. I mean, more ask me, but I wouldn't get them for them because I don't know them that well, and they all want like loads, about 30, 40 E's, something like that. So this fifth form leavers party, and I don't know whether to do it or not, because, you know, I'd want the money first and everything, because I ain't got that sort of money to buy like that amount.
Among the most popular drugs that Sam sells are trips, LSD. They're as cheap as £2.50 and cynically targeted at the young market.
No, well, trips, they've got like little cartoon characters on them. I mean, like, you could get Dennis and Menace and Bart Simpson, things like that, and everyone thinks, oh, well, I'm going to turn into Bart Simpson or whatever. And it's just really stupid.
Would you describe yourself as a drug dealer?
No, wouldn't.
But you sell drugs to other children?
Yeah.
What's the difference?
What's the difference? It's not as if I buy it in like big batches in order to sell it. I don't like go around like saying, oh, do you want this, do you want that all the time? I'll just get it if people like want it, if people ask me.
Would you like to sell more drugs and bigger drugs later on in your life?
I would, but I think like that's an easy way to make money basically, but I don't think I'd have the guts to do it.
In one town in this area, we came across dog worming tablets that were being passed off as X, and that's going to do something else to the...
Stuart Ware is on the other side of the drugs war in Hertfordshire.
So they're going to be jigging around, but for all the wrong reasons.
He runs a voluntary agency, TRIP, which offers drugs counselling and information to parents like these.
If we were talking up until about 89, 90, my caseload was, and those of my colleagues working with me, was something like 50 over a 4 or 5 year period, of what we would call requests for help from young people or their parents. Since that time, we've had over 3,500 calls for help. Crack is free-based cocaine hydrochloride, where it's burnt off and it's inhaled.
Dr. Ware is also the health education coordinator for Hertfordshire.
Price varies, £10, £15 a rock, depends where it is. But it's in our cities and it's moving up into this area.
At a time when the drugs problem is growing rapidly, resources to fight it are desperately short.
No, in East Hart, there isn't an agency. So where the drug users go, I don't know. They have to try and find their own way through somehow, as they've done for years. Sometimes it's by graft, by conning, by trying to persuade a local GP to help them. by turning up at some agency elsewhere, hoping they will help them, and many of them do.
But most of the youngsters we've spoken to either believe that the risks of drug taking are negligible, or else they just don't care.
Risk-taking is part of normal adolescent behavior. Sometimes they have this exaggerated view of their abilities. I can handle it. I can take it or leave it when I want.
Cannabis, there's totally nothing wrong with cannabis. There's more like deaths due to alcohol than there is to cannabis.
If people use it too heavily, it can cause disorientation, and it can lead to a frank psychosis. That means a schizophrenic type breakdown.
Only last month, the youngest known victim of ecstasy died at a rave. He was just 15. But Sam ignores reports about the dangers of drugs.
Don't look at him. Because you're only going to worry yourself and put yourself off, and I don't see the point in putting myself off if I enjoy doing it.
There have been perhaps 50 deaths in the last 2 or 3 years due to heat stroke from people dancing all night after taking ecstasy. This is unarguable, it's clear-cut. Well, worming tablets, aquarium cleaning tablets, brick dust, whatever's in it, is not as harmful as the ecstasy itself.
In fact, the greatest fear for children now is that they will move on to harder drugs. Many youngsters say that they would never touch heroin, but some still fall into the trap. Jason became an addict when he was 13.
A lot of people around my way started taking heroin, and everyone was going, "No, that's scum, heroin's scum," and all that. And I was just curious why it was scum and why everyone was going mad over it or whatever. When I first started injecting, like a couple of my mates was injecting in front of me, and I was just like, I don't know why, I was just fascinated by it for some reason.
But for Jason, the glamour soon wore off.
So I was spending like £50 a day sort of thing, and I was just in trouble, banging trouble, and my mum was finding needles all over the place and that. She was really upset, crying to me and things like that, which made me feel really low. And
now 17, Jason is on methadone, trying to end his addiction. Ollie Fay is now also off drugs and trying to recover. He spent the past 3 months at this rehab centre on the outskirts of Tunbridge Wells.
When I started my drug abuse, I thought I'd never do heroin, because that's always the drug that you imagine junkies taking. When I started taking heroin, I didn't seem to care. Even my friends that took drugs with me seemed to stay away from me when I was on heroin, because I've changed a lot as a person. But heroin's just one of those drugs. When you're on it, you don't care what you have to do. I lost a lot of friends, and I came close to losing my family as well.
Welcome back. The evidence is clear. A large number, possibly the majority of youngsters living in London, will take drugs before they're out of their teens. Children are starting younger and are now more likely than ever to move on to harder drugs. In the war against addiction, schools are now in the front line. Parents expect them to warn their children of the dangers of abuse and prevent drug taking. And yet the pressure for head teachers to get tough is provoking painful dilemmas for parents and schools alike. Our research turned up numerous stories about drugs in school. Here's what happened to one 9-year-old South London boy.
We was at the end of the dinner line, me and my friend, and the boy who was next to us who offered the drugs, and he offered us this brown stuff with silver things around the side. We didn't know what it was, so we threw it back in his hands. And after the dinner, we went down to the playground, and then he offered us this blue tablet, and we didn't want that either because we didn't know it was, but we knew it was like drugs. He offered my brother it as well, this blue tablet. And I got home and I told my mum, and she went to the head teacher.
Keith's primary school notified the police, but the substance offered was never discovered.
I was really horrified. I couldn't believe that your children at that sort of age are coming up with things like this.
Yes.
No,
No, just mention release.
Release is a drugs and legal advice service. They run a national telephone helpline. Their recent experience suggests that schools are now routinely catching pupils with drugs.
We do get a lot of calls each week. It is an emergency service, so we're probably getting about one call a day that is a real emergency. And that is perhaps from a parent or a young person in school who is very upset, having been involved in a drug incident, and we'll take the situation from there. But certainly the situation is getting increasingly serious. There's no doubt about that whatsoever.
Many of the child users we've spoken to confirm that drugs are readily available and regularly used in schools. Our poll of young London discovered that 35% of the children we spoke to had been offered drugs in school. Tim and Dominic are two 15-year-old boys who attend a boarding school just outside London. Both are using drugs with their classmates.
Well, there's quite a lot of fifth years and stuff in our school that do actually have quite a lot of drugs, and they do actually sell it to some of the younger ones. Like say, they bring money from home, and they just quite easily spend away, and then they go downtown and they just don't really enjoy themselves, So it's quite good.
Just go down the town, and if we like get the money together between us, we buy something like a trip, like a penguin or something. If not, then maybe a joint, some hash or something, like an eighth, and just go down, sit down in a nice quiet place, just all like smoke a joint or take a trip and just like have a really good time.
Tim and Dominic say they use drugs as a comfort to relieve the tedium of boarding school life.
I don't like being away from home for a long time period, and if I'm not allowed to go home and maybe a weekend I feel bad, if I've got a chance of getting something I will. I mean, I remember only once I've actually taken a trip in school, and that was a 7-hour trip, and that was pretty hard having to come back into school in time. So it causes awkwardness for taking the actual drugs, but then again, it's good, the feeling.
The fear of drugs is now so great in schools that some heads are turning in desperation to methods which would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Stowe School in Buckinghamshire is one of a growing number of private schools that has introduced drug testing. This letter was sent to parents last Easter, informing them that urine tests would be used where there was suspicion of drug abuse among pupils. It followed the expulsion of a pupil in 1992 for using cannabis. However, only last summer, since the introduction of testing, 3 pupils were expelled and several more suspended for suspected involvement in an LSD ring. And Sevenoaks School has considered going further with random tests for all pupils. Neither Stowe nor Sevenoaks were willing to explain their drug testing policies. But Russell School in Lancashire, one of the first to introduce a drug testing regime for pupils, were prepared to go public.
We introduced the policy of testing at Russell quite simply because I felt it was necessary to be in a position to give a very clear statement to our parents and to future parents as to what the school's policy was. At the same time, I wanted all the boys and girls to know exactly what the total arsenal of disciplinary sanctions was if these things came to light. The children know that there are certain offences over which I will take a very strong line. If I have suspicion about people's involvement in drugs, I will have them tested, and if they are found to be positive, they must expect to be expelled.
If a pupil is suspected, a urine sample is sent for lab testing. The results are back in a matter of days. Testing appears to be having some effect.
Within the last 2 or 3 years, I've had to use it twice. This was because rumours were flying around about 2 individuals. On both occasions, the test proved negative.
However, these new get tough measures are not welcomed by everyone. Wellington College, a public school in Berkshire, has rejected testing.
Testing for drugs is not an approach that we would wish to adopt. We believe that boys and girls have a pride in their school. They enjoy being here. And that this pride is based on an openness to discuss their problems with the staff. If the drugs education was based not on that openness, but was based on fear and suspicion, that all pupils were potential drug takers and we didn't trust any of them, then I think that the pride would disappear, that the success rate, I think, would be very low.
There will be some people, as you know, who would suggest that I was overstepping the bounds, perhaps that this was a gross intrusion on people's liberties and freedoms and so on. I don't accept that. My position in a boarding school is that I am in loco parentis. I therefore will apply exactly the same rules and ground rules to the children in my charge as I would apply to my own children. And if I felt my own children had at some time in the past been involved in drugs, I would, as a father, have required them to have a urine test if the matter was a question of dispute between us.
Whatever schools do discover by testing, it's only the start of a difficult process to decide how to deal with drug-taking pupils. Youngsters arrested by the Metropolitan Police for possession or use of drugs are likely to escape with a caution, but schools, ironically, often react more strongly than the police. Last October, Whitgift, a private school in South Croydon, excluded a large number of pupils on suspicion of using cannabis. Adrian and Lee were among those expelled.
We used to smoke actually at school, and nobody ever came round to like search and look, see who was smoking. So we just kept it quite quiet and was sensible and got away with it, really. You know that the police don't really do anything about it nowadays, and as long as you were careful, you could get away with it, and it was just easy to do.
Ironically, it was Lee's parents who had first approached the school last year.
Last May I went to the school to inform them that I was worried about the drug situation. When they went back to school in September, I again went to the school because I was still worried. They had this massive inquiry, and the end result was that they did these mass expulsions and suspensions.
On the strength of confessions from a number of boys, Whitgift expelled 10 and suspended 15 other pupils. Lee and Adrian are particularly bitter about their treatment. They believe that because of their honesty, they were punished for something that was widespread among the school's pupils.
I just confessed to what I did. They said that if I told the truth, it would go in my favour, so I did, and it didn't.
Both boys are adamant that some people who smoked cannabis went completely unpunished.
There are still people at Whitgift that have smoked cannabis and haven't been involved, or the whole investigation hasn't touched them at all. So many other people got away with it all.
I felt very bitter about the way it had been handled and that I'd been singled out. So if all the other boys had done it as well as I had, then why should I be singled out?
Whitgift staff we've spoken to sympathise with the families, who've now formed an action group. Some parents don't want their surnames revealed.
Having had our sons at that school for so long and being good parents, I in particular was on a fundraising committee for a year and a half and worked jolly hard with that, and then to be told that my son was going to be expelled and without enough reason and no support to find another school. We've just been treated so badly. I just really cannot come to terms with that.
My son was actually expelled for admitting to taking puffs of another boy's joint. The other boys that have actually owned the joints are still at the school. The punishments don't seem to line up at all.
The parents are particularly concerned about how the school carried out the investigation and arrived at the guilty verdicts.
Was aggravated by the headmaster saying in no uncertain terms to my son that he would write personally to every university to which my son had applied, saying exactly what kind of character he was, ruining his chances. He actually said, you will not be able to go to any university in Britain. I will see to it, unless you just really Welsh on, just tell me everything you know. And when we heard that, we thought, well, how can he do this?
The parents also claim that the school ignored guidelines issued by Croydon Council, specifically for dealing with drug incidents.
The distressing part about it is that there are clearly defined procedures that operate in Croydon and Whitgift School as well are contract to that. In fact, members of their staff and the previous headmaster was on the particular procedures board.
The guidelines call for parents and the police to be notified of drug incidents. The police were only notified after the exclusions, and some parents were not informed for days. The school is also supposed to inform parents of counselling services and help excluded pupils to find alternative schools. Parents claim this did not happen. We asked Whitgift to comment on the parents' complaints. The school refused to take part in this programme. The parents, who have now started legal action, don't dispute that their children have tried drugs, but they're bitter that having alerted the school to the problem, the punishment has been so harsh.
I think if the situation had been handled with some compassion and some understanding, and the headmaster had sought advice before he'd embarked on this reign of terror, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight talking to you.
Other heads who've tried to make a stand against drugs have also had to confront parent power. Dr. Richard Skinner, head of a comprehensive at Romsey in Hampshire, excluded 3 boys caught smoking cannabis last October. Parents of 2 of the boys appealed against Dr. Skinner's decision. They won an appeal to the county council, and the pupils have been reinstated, despite continuing opposition from the head and teachers.
The decision of the appeal committee, which is binding, is formal, and against which there is no appeal. And their decision was that the 2 pupils whose parents appealed should be returned to this school. One returned immediately after half-term in February, and the other one will return at the beginning of the summer term.
And how do you feel about that?
Cheated. Quite frankly, we feel that the authority of the school has been undermined.
When so many youngsters are experimenting with drugs, managing drug-related incidents is immensely difficult for school heads. But many believe they have little room for manoeuvre. In the new competitive education market, the image of schools is paramount.
When did Italy invade?
And teachers feel that they have little option but to exclude.
If a school gets into the local news as having a pupil or some pupils who are involved with drugs, even if that's well outside the school, then the reputation of the school can be tarnished, which means that when parents are making decisions on where to send their children, they can decide against a school on a horror story that they've read, and each child to us is worth money, which is a rather nasty way of looking at it, but no children, no money, therefore no school. How am I going to prove the point that I take this very seriously and won't tolerate it? Because the temptation is to exclude. I have a person here with drugs, drugs are dangerous, that person cannot come to my school.
But according to some drugs agencies, the get tough approach is both unfair and, with the current levels of drug taking, unrealistic.
The reaction is very swift, and it is what we would describe as a knee-jerk reaction. There's very little thought that goes into it. The principal concern seems to be about the reputation. Now, we can understand that what's going on. It takes sometimes years to build up a good reputation, and it can disappear practically overnight if there's very unsympathetic media coverage, for example, and if parents disagree and governors can disagree, there can be real problems. Having said that, what we're noticing is that problems are simply not addressed, that schools respond in such a way as to simply permanently exclude very quickly, almost immediately, and then ask questions later, by which time it's too late.
Well, I think the idea of permanently excluding kids for drugs problems is completely counterproductive. It's just playing pass the parcel with kids. Those kids have to get an education somewhere, so you pass your problem on to another school. And the problem with that is that you also don't tackle the young person's problem. You've got a young person there using drugs who isn't going to get any help. It's going to be treated as a disciplinary issue for the school.
Dr. Skinner disagrees. He feels that a more lenient approach was not an option available to him.
There wasn't a question of whether we were dealing with soft drugs, hard drugs, or whatever. It was drugs. And because it is such a serious issue in society, we felt that as a school, we'd got to stand up and be counted.
For children, the consequences of exclusion can be damaging and long-lasting. At Whitgift, several boys were excluded shortly before crucial exams. Their parents told us they'd had to make alternative arrangements at very short notice. After 6 months, Lee is still having to do his schoolwork at home. He hasn't been able to find another school. His mother blames Whitgift.
We wrote to the numerous, all independent schools, because at that stage we thought, well, obviously we can go to another independent school, but only to find out that the headmaster had informed all the other heads and nobody really wanted to take boys that had been expelled.
Lee's work has suffered.
I've got very little chance of doing well in my GCSEs because I've missed so much coursework. It's turned my life upside down, and so I'm just picking up the pieces now.
For another former Whitgift pupil who did not want to be identified, exclusion has meant a drastic revision of his future plans.
Well, I was planning on doing a gap year with the Army, a short service limited commission, and then being sponsored for 3 years to university, and then doing a 3-year commission when I came out of university. But when I was involved with this investigation at Whitgift, I phoned up the Major, who was the Regimental Careers Officer, to explain what had gone on, and he explained that that was now out of the question because they wouldn't touch with the barge pole because they couldn't have people that are on drugs bearing arms for the country.
The incident has left parents extremely cynical about the way the school acted.
At the end of this, I now can honestly say that lying is best, because had we told Lee to lie, he may still be at the school.
Welcome back. Whatever's been said to London's children about the evils of drugs, the message is plainly not getting through. Increasing numbers of youngsters either don't believe or just ignore the risks of using. Nearly everyone agrees prevention is the only effective solution, and as the costs of the drugs crisis spiral, the need for a new and dynamic approach becomes more vital. A group of 7-year-olds from an exclusive St John's Wood prep school. Life Education Centres are a voluntary agency. They visit primary schools with mobile units and give courses on drugs and health, tailoring the programmes to different ages.
Takes the alcohol straight up to the person's brain. Does that explain why they start doing things that they wouldn't normally do?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Something like alcohol, which is not food, it's not water, and it's not oxygen. It goes into the body and changes the way the body works. What would we call something like that?
Drugs.
Yeah, drugs are things
Increasingly, the message is being taken to younger children.
Interesting, isn't it? Can you think of any other drugs?
Well, I think I'd have to say that we're surprised at the awareness of drugs. Certainly there's an enormous awareness that they've heard about the drug, they know it's around, they might have experienced it from an older brother or sister or whatever, but they have an awareness, but the knowledge is what the problem is.
Medicines, yeah, are medicines drugs?
This type of approach should be the way forward, but in many areas of London, drugs education is variable or even non-existent, and the costs of not having it are clear.
Anybody ever here been to the doctor for an injection?
Early morning on a drugs raid, one of just hundreds carried out every year. Drugs are now the major driving force behind crime in the capital.
I'd say it's probably 3 ounces of heroin there. Current street value is between £1,800 and £2,000 an ounce.
A small-scale success against a background of increasing despair.
We're seizing more drugs, arresting more people, seeing more money, seeing more crime, seeing more violence associated with the problem.
We spoke to a part-time worker at a drugs project in South London who's been using heroin for 5 years. Like thousands of other addicts, crime was her major source of income.
I started taking crack and stuff. We'd go out and about and look about to see what we could do to get some money. Most of the time we robbed people on the street, like street robbery and stuff. Sometimes we'd get £25, sometimes we'd get £800, it all depends. And this used to go on throughout the day. We'd like get the money, go home and spend it, and then the money would be gone in about an hour, so we'd have to go back out again and rob someone again. We didn't even want the money. If we could have robbed someone who had drugs, we would have. That's all we wanted. We didn't want money, we just wanted drugs.
The young users we've found are already beginning to follow the same path.
I've been breaking into cars lately, getting the car stereos, selling for about £50–30. Just go and buy a drawer, sit down, when that's gone, just go and get the next stereo. After that, I got caught by police, got charged, got £160 fine. Then I just started stealing from family.
When I started using heroin, money started getting really, really short because it's very expensive. And used to just go out, do a couple of jobs at burglaries, go into someone's house, get money that way. Actually nicked a few cars once and sold those for the profits.
12-year-old David has also already started stealing.
Used to nick some money off my mum and dad. Used to go and buy £30 worth of drugs. Today I nicked £166, belonged to my mum off of her social books, and went and bought drugs in that.
Just a stone's throw from David's home, this new boxing gym is opening. It's part of a joint strategy by Brent Council and the local police to refer young suspects to drug agencies and help them get off the streets. Just one more attempt to crack the drugs crisis.
Recent research has shown that the cost of crime, drugs-related crime in this borough, adds up to something like £5 million a year. And by the nature of the crime, you are saying that those are crimes that are committed generally by people in the 14 to 17-year age bracket. The social costs are estimated another £12 million, so you begin to see that it's a very expensive business, something like £17 million a year.
With these costs in mind, the police are adamant that attempts at prevention have never been more vital.
We say amongst ourselves that a good day for the police is a day the problem doesn't get any worse. And with a great deal of support from a variety of agencies, by hitting a balance between enforcement and the various other activities that we take part in, then the police can sit on the lid for society to buy some time whilst education policies bite. But that is the best you can expect of the police. The police will not solve the problem for you.
Drugs? She hears something about drugs and goes berserk. She doesn't even...
The government's anti-drugs campaign is being fought on a number of fronts. The Department of Health recently launched this ad. It's been broadly welcomed, but many critics feel that not enough is being done by the government.
Anyway, my mates know more about it than she does.
If you don't talk to your child about drugs, someone else will.
There are some good initiatives, but it is at best patchy, and we'd like to see a national, coherent provision for drug education in this country.
From the heart of Brent, this is Radio Bears, better entertainment.
This local radio station in Brent is backed by one of 6 local initiatives set up in London by the Home Office, but funding for the schemes is only guaranteed for 1 more year.
An awful lot of what passes for drugs education is just designed to make adults feel better. A lot of it is a kind of PR exercise. And I'm not overly impressed with most of it.
And according to our exclusive poll, the anti-drugs message is simply failing to get through. When we asked whether the warnings about drugs had deterred them, more than 70% of young people said government and school campaigns had had little or no effect. At Wellington, drugs education is now taken very seriously. Pupils here have been suspected of being involved with drugs in the past. In April 1992, 11 pupils were suspended and questioned by police after allegations they took cannabis and ecstasy.
This is evil, right? This is premeditated.
Phil Cooper is an ex-addict who tours private schools with a special lecture.
A teaspoon or some flour or something, or Pictos. But, like, could you physically take that and make that into powder now? Our contacts with dealers told us of a recent case where most of the MDMA from a 500 capsule consignment of E from Holland was replaced with a fine white powder produced by crushing the glass from light bulbs.
He warns pupils of the risks of drug taking.
Used to make more capsules. If that's not proof that the lens prepared to go, I don't know what is.
We needed somebody with authority, we needed somebody who had knowledge, and above all, who could communicate with young people, who could talk at their level in the language they understood.
You'd have to think about it, right? Powder it down, then stick it into a capsule, then sell it you. £15. I know exactly what it is I'm giving you. This is like really evil. I certainly wouldn't want to swallow a capsule full of broken glass. You said you wouldn't want to take it.
Providing youngsters with facts about drugs so that they can make their own informed decisions about drug taking is now considered more effective than telling them to just say no.
What we find that Phil Cooper's visit does is to help them to change their attitude towards drugs, to understand the facts rather than the myths rather better, and therefore to resist pressurization.
Unidentified. Oh, it's ecstasy.
We're fortunate that he visits us regularly and we can afford to employ him.
Do you know, anybody know what
The kind of education program that Wellington offers is exceptional. It may work, but it's expensive and out of the reach of nearly all state schools. At a time when more children are using more drugs than ever before, the government has angered many by cutting drugs education money. Last March, they withdrew the Grant for Education Support Training, known as GEST. It gave money to local authorities for health education coordinators, to train teachers and provide backup. 1 year ago, all 33 London boroughs, except the 4 marked in blue, had a full-time health education coordinator. 12 months later, only 5 boroughs still have comparable full-time coordinators. In the others, the work has become diluted or part-time or lost altogether. Kaleidoscope, a voluntary agency in Kingston in South London, has noticed significant changes since the axe fell.
What you've seen is a drastic cutback in the amount of people that are able to come on training courses. Schools simply just don't have the money. When funding was available to send primary school teachers on the training courses here at Kaleidoscope, they were fully booked and very popular. Since funding has been withdrawn, the last training course we ran, we had only 2 teachers attend from the whole of the borough, and now that's out of over 30 primary schools in Kingston.
A senior Tory backbencher has joined the many critics of the cut and the consequent loss of the health education coordinators.
I believe it was a great mistake of the government to withdraw that funding. It is a crucial element in the whole war against drugs misuse, and I use the word war very carefully chosen, that we reduce demand, and the way that we're going to reduce demand is to get instilled into young people's minds the feelings that health is important and that drug misuse is dangerous, and they were crucial to that.
The government has defended its decision by saying that GEST funding was only ever temporary and that drugs education is required by the national curriculum anyway. But many doubt that teachers are the best people to deliver the information.
It's stuff that's expected to be delivered by science teachers who aren't particularly trained for that purpose. So it's there nominally. What actually gets across in the classroom is tremendously variable from school to school, from area to area.
Whether any drugs education is offered to children is now decided by the school and the local authority, both often financially hard-pressed. Few effective warnings have got through to John, Lee, Sam or David. Those they did hear, they failed to heed. Many more children could be about to follow their example.
If we don't tackle it in a rational way, and in a way that's practical and designed to work rather than just make ourselves feel better, we're going to pay for this in a very big way in the future. We're going to have American-type situations where there is drug dealing going on in schools, where the street scene and the use of guns becomes widespread, where drug use is an accepted norm, and where the poorest areas in our society are having to face problems of people who need vast amounts of money that they're obtaining through crime, which depress those areas even further. So as a society, I think if we don't get on top of this, it's a catastrophic scenario.
David's parents now believe that they're powerless to prevent him sliding into drugs dependence. Nothing they've done has worked.
It's unbelievable the amount of control we've tried to do with David. We've done everything apart from hit him. Doesn't work. He's been to psychiatrists and everything to try and stop him on the drugs, but nothing seemed to have worked. At first we started blaming ourselves. We thought we had done something wrong. We sat down, we asked him, no, we haven't done anything wrong. Nothing works with David. Nothing works with David.
We invited Education Secretary John Patton and Health Secretary Virginia Bottomley to discuss this issue. They both declined. At a time when some estimates put the cost of drug-related crime in Britain at £2 billion, the government has cut jest funding and saved less than £3 million a year. That may turn out to be one of the most expensive pieces of cost-cutting in this government's lifetime. Good night.
The final London programme special is next Sunday night at 5 to 11.
Our LWT Action hotline can offer advice about drug problems, plus a free workshop for teachers. Ring 071 284 5020. That's 071 284 5020.
LWT's Easter Sunday with the original Man of Steel, Superman, his first and best adventure at 6:30.
Easy, miss. I've got you.
In Life and Death, we'll be looking at remarkable medical cases where patients have survived against massive odds.
Join Selena Scott at 8:55. And at 9:25, the Sweeney, Tiswas, and Madam Sin. Just what was the trouble with the 70s?
Let us remind ourselves of the sheer energy.
Ask Aspel and find out on Easter Sunday.
Next, Sail the World. The Whitbread fleet prepares for the final legs.